All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our unit on the prairies. And the last section we'll be looking at today, which is the Northwest Rebellion. All right, early 1880s, the Métis were again became frustrated with the government. They wanted title to the land they were living on and support in the transition to becoming farmers. They had no intention of rebelling. They just wanted to be treated fairly. But as we know with the Canadian government, things never go that smoothly. Canadian government had its own ideas for the land and the Métis were living. With the cost of the railway skyrocketing, they wanted to collect taxes from the sale of the land to subsidize the railway. They estimated the taxes would be about $71 million, and that's in 1880s time, so just imagine what it would be like today. They had no intention of working with the Métis over land agreements. The building of the railway also affected Aboriginal people in the prairies. Although the number of treaties were signed, money was diverted from the Indian Department to building the railway. So all the things that they had been promised when they had signed treaties was now going to build the railway. They were not ending up to their end of the bargain where they're training them how to farm, giving them the equipment needed to farm, things like that. So more and more people were becoming frustrated and effectively cut off people who were deemed difficult Indians, and many were almost starved to death. So if people were complaining too loudly, they were effectively cut off and in a way forced to almost starve to death. In 1884, the Métis sent people to Montana to discuss with Riel the possibility of him returning. Yes, Louis Riel, and he was coming back. He came back with peaceful intentions. He did not want to go through the same thing that had happened at Red River. But when he comes back, the government automatically starts to assume that, okay, here we go. We are going for another rebellion, Louis Riel Part 2. So what happens is they come to the prairies, Riel comes back, and they create in 1884 the Métis Bill of Rights. All right, the Métis Bill of Rights hopes this document would air their grievances and also lead to creation of a new province. The government ignored the Métis Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights was much more detailed than the list of rights from 1869. So the Métis had learned from their mistakes. I wouldn't even call them mistakes, but they had learned from the original 1869 list of rights to make sure they included all kinds of different aspects that would help their society out. It reflected the frustration of the Métis and others to be treated as equals. It resembled the American Declaration of Independence. The Indians were so bad off, many locals are compelled to support them. Métis territory did not receive their 240 acres each. They had not received land title, had to pay dues on essential building supplies. Customs and duties are leveled on necessities of life. No access to European markets to sell goods. Coercion takes place at votes because there's no secret ballots. And Section 17 detailed the grievances from the Manitoba Act. So all these different things that were promised to them in Manitoba and under the Manitoba Act and even under Canada weren't being followed, so they list their grievances in this way. Macdonald was facing a crisis in 1885. The railway was almost bankrupt, and if the troops were needed, they needed to be moved quickly by rail. Macdonald saw the tension as an opportunity to finish the CPR. If war broke out, he could use the railway to get the public use the railway, and the public would be able to see why it was needed. So in other words, Macdonald and that were in trouble when it came to building the railway. People were getting fed up of putting more and more money into this railway, and Macdonald sees this whole thing as being a use for the CPR to get the troops out there so we can show people to get people on his side. So Macdonald in a way does, or through his lack of things, he actually helps to fuel the fire of this rebellion. Spring of 1885, the Eastern Militia was ready to be called out, and the Manitoba Militia was already moving into the area. So by these two military groups moving into the area with Riel and the other Métis could see that the government was inching closer and closer towards an armed conflict. Lieutenant Governor banned the sale of ammunition, cutting off the Métis from weapons. So in other words, Métis see what's coming, they need to buy ammunition and supplies, but the lieutenant governor knows what's coming, and he bans the sale of this stuff, effectively cutting off the Métis from supplying themselves. In March 1885, Riel gave a speech indicating that the government had no plans for a peaceful settlement and the people should be ready for a conflict. The first clash actually takes place at a place called Duck Lake near Batoche. They tried to settle it peacefully, but 2 Métis negotiators were shot, and within 30 minutes, 12 Northwest Mounted Police officers were killed and another 25 wounded. So at Batoche, what happens is they go and they try to negotiate. The Europeans say, no, we're not negotiating, bang, bang. There goes the 2 Métis negotiators. And the Métis see that as an act of war against them and go out there and slaughter 12 Northwest Mounted Police officers and also injuring 25 more. So when word of that gets back, it's not going to be a good thing for the Métis in Eastern Canada. Instantaneously after they found out about this, 5,000 troops were deployed and most were sent to Batoche and St. Laurent. In April, 1,600 men clashed with 60 Métis, and the Métis, led by Gabriel Dumont, held them off for an entire day. So 1,600 versus 60, and the Métis were able to hold them off until reinforcements arrived, but the troops still did not reach Batoche until May 9th. So Gabriel Dumont was trying to stall the advancement of the soldiers as long as he could, and as you can see, it was almost a month later that they were able to finally get to Batoche on May 9th. The Métis were able to hold off the troops for a period of time, but they could not hold them off just out of sheer numbers. Riel and Dumont had discussions about what was happening and realized that Riel knew they were going to lose. Riel was captured on May 15th and Dumont escaped to the United States. After the rebellion, the Canadian troops tracked down all those who had taken part in the rebellion. Most of these people were either pardoned or had short prison sentences. So all those people who participated in this rebellion basically were given slaps on the wrist, except for Louis Riel. The government saw Louis Riel as the one who was instigating it, and all these other ones were kind of like children who didn't really know what they're doing, and they're easily led astray by Riel. So the government decides to take its full effort out on Louis Riel as the person who was driving the rebellion and all the conflict. They charged Riel with treason for taking up arms against the Canadian government. The Canadian government wanted to make an example of Riel. Riel was represented by 3 French lawyers who wanted him to plead guilty on insanity. The judge was conservative and the jury were Protestant. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this picture? Alarm bells should be going off in your head. As in, here we have some French lawyers who are defending Riel, who wanted to plead guilty by insanity, and Riel refused to. And then the judge, who's a conservative and he's English. And then we have the jury, who were made up of Protestant people. The Métis were French, Aboriginal, and Catholic. The judge, conservative, jury, Protestant. What happens here is a travesty of justice. He was in a no-win situation, and he used the time on trial to blame the Canadian government for the rebellion, but the jury and many English did not care. So he used it as a kind of as a soapbox thing, where he was able to air out all his problems about the Canadian government and the way they're being treated, but nothing materialized from this. He's found guilty, and the judge and jury recommended clemency. That means he'd just be thrown in jail and things like that. But the Canadian government were the ones that insisted on Riel being made a scapegoat, and they wanted him killed. So on November 16th, 1885, Louis Riel was executed. That is it. So we'll be looking obviously more in depth and more in detail on this topic and Louis Riel in the coming days. Thank you very much.